Hello and welcome to the Pro AVL Podcast. I'm James Cook. I'm joined today by Sarah James.
Hello.
And my colleague Sue Gould.
Hello.
And we're here today to talk about PR, public relations. Is it public relations?
It is, yeah. Public relations, it's in two parts really. There's public relations and press relations. And I guess what I do mainly is the press relations side of it.
Tell us a bit about your company and how long you've been in the Pro AV industry.
Well, I've been in the Pro AV industry since 1987. When I left college. But I've been doing PR since 1993. I started with working with David Neal, who had a company called DNA, who sadly is no longer with us. And I started gasoline in 2000.
What led you to start the company? How did you move on into kind of running your own business?
Well, I'd sort of gone as far as I could with David, and I actually only left because I wanted to try something a little bit different. And I went and worked for a design agency for a little while. But at the time, my daughter was very young, and working full-time for a company just didn't work for me in the end, because I was getting home at sort of 7 o'clock at night, and when you've got a 4-year-old, getting home at 7 and then getting them to bed and all that sort of stuff, and not being there for school plays and whatever else they need, and if they're sick it's a huge issue, just didn't work. So I decided that the easy thing to do, or easier thing to do, was to work for myself, and then I didn't have to worry about asking permission to take time off to do anything that I needed to do with my daughter. I could just make up the time when she'd gone to bed. And this industry, having gone out of it, I decided was something that I really loved. So I decided that I would set up on my own and come back in.
How hard was it to get started? Obviously, so you had contacts from working in the industry previously?
I did. I actually started gasoline with Mike Lethby, and Mike, having been editor of Live magazine however many years ago, actually had far more contacts than I had, so he brought a lot of those contacts with him, and we ran gasoline together for 3 years, and then we split the company, and I took some of the clients and he took some of the clients, and I've just carried on my own ever since.
And today you represent some of the biggest names in the industry. Who's currently on your books?
I've got a couple of new clients who are Brompton Technology, who make the most fantastic processors for LED screens, and SFL Group, who are a full production and sales company. But the clients that I've been working with for the longest, Digico, who I've been working with since they started in 2002, L-Acoustics and Sennheiser UK.
How's that kind of divided? So you work with Sennheiser UK?
They divide it up into territories because it's such a big company. In terms of our industry, it's a big company. So they have a PR agency for every territory that they have. And they also split it between the pro side and the consumer side. So there are generally 2 agencies that work with them per territory.
Are there kind of any positives to splitting off PR depending on region and obviously type as well, consumer, pro?
It all goes through Germany. So they do it all, they control it all centrally.
Right.
So that actually makes it quite easy, and we have a very definite plan for the year. They put together a plan for the year, so they work out what products they want to concentrate on, if there's any particular vertical market sectors that they want to concentrate on, and they tell us what they need to do, and then we go off and do it. And I think if somebody was trying to do it on a global basis, it would be such a big thing to handle that it wouldn't work quite as well as it does. But I'm really lucky because the UK is a key territory for them, partly because a lot of the UK magazines are either pan-European or global, and what we do tends to make it out across the world.
I should also add that got your dog Poppy here walking around the studio. What type of dog is she? What breed?
She's a Springer Spaniel, an English Springer Spaniel.
How old is she?
She's 9, and she's very gorgeous.
She's still very excitable.
Actually, she's really calm for a Springer.
I think part of the excitement was probably coming in from the rain from the British summer.
Well, part of the excitement is having been in the car for an hour and lots of new people to play with. But normally, if I'm in the office, then she just lies down beside me and goes to sleep. 2 walks a day and she's fine.
Would you say she's another perk of working for yourself?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. But she was my empty nest syndrome when my daughter left home. I got a dog.
Should just say that as I also have an English Springer Spaniel like Sarah, we have had a number of very intense and serious business meetings walking together with our dogs.
We have, and some exciting instance as well.
Oh yes, chasing sheep. But hey, we won't go there.
Yeah, not mine, by the way. Just saying.
I've been told by a lot of the men in this industry that all the business is done over a beer, so...
Or golf.
Or golf.
Isn't it? That's the other way. We just do it over dog walking.
Oh. So, obviously, I wanted to, kind of pick your brains about PR and kind of, I guess, kind of give people an idea of what it is. So, kind of why is PR important to businesses kind of big and small?
If you look at the definition of PR is maintaining the reputation of a company and making sure that the reputation that you want to portray is seen by your public, and that's whether it's external, so your customers, and internal as well. So making sure that your employees know what you're doing and that they feel involved and invested in the company.
What's the difference between PR and marketing? Are they more or less the same thing? Is there a difference between them?
They do cross over, but PR is more working on the editorial side of things, so I suppose the words that you put out, and marketing is much more sales driven. So the things that marketing are doing are designed to sort of bring business in, whereas PR is spreading the word. So you don't get that sort of, or generally don't get that direct sale from PR. It's more of a long-term thing rather than a short-term gain.
So you could say marketing's kind of to drive the input and PR's the output from the company as such.
But I think you'd agree. I mean, I hope you'd agree. We always say that the best campaigns and the best way of working together is when you have a consistent message that is crossing both the PR side and the marketing, and they are being used to complement each other.
Definitely.
And that's why it's really important that that communication is open and regular, I think.
Between the PR and the press.
Yeah,
you're talking
absolutely.
about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, PR concerns more myself as a member of an editorial team, whereas marketing goes more towards Sue as a sales director here.
Yeah.
To place the ads.
Yeah, but I think there are ways that there is, there's an area that it crosses on occasions when we know that maybe you're working on a story or something like that, so we can make it into something bigger, and there's a campaign that's running alongside it to complement that.
Yeah, so one reinforces the other, definitely.
Would you say a lack of PR could hurt a company?
I don't know whether it hurts a company, but I think it's probably easier for a company to reach its full potential if you've got a proper PR campaign. But you do need to run that marketing campaign alongside it as well. PR is great, but particularly in our industry, where we know that you as trade magazines, your income based on advertising revenue, the editorial is free.
I think very much now it's out of sight, out of mind, and if there's an expectation that you will be reading or seeing or hearing or visiting or whatever with manufacturers and companies and finding out more about product, and if that's not out there and you're not seeing it, then I think that does hurt. There's so much competition these days.
There is, that's really true. But then if we're talking about PR, I suppose within PR we have to include social media, and a lot of companies do, particularly when they're starting, they will do what they consider to be their own PR in-house and do it just via social media, because obviously social media is very powerful. But I think particularly when you're in a niche industry, it's really important to have a good spread. So just social media isn't going to reach as many people as if you're going into the trade magazines as well, because we all know that social media tends to talk to the same people. So you're in your own little bubble, you're sort of talking to the converted a lot of the time. Whereas if you're going into the magazines as well, then you're reaching a much wider audience and people that wouldn't necessarily have seen you.
Speaking as someone who works for a trade magazine, we have our own social media platforms as well. So sharing content with us and news with us doesn't just end up in the pages of a magazine anymore. It ends up on our social media pages as well, with a different audience to, say, the manufacturer's own social media page. So
it does, absolutely. And also, if you're going on to a magazine's social media, then that feeds back into your own social media, which is really good for your SEO and all that sort of stuff, and that helps everything to grow.
So it all comes around in one big circle.
It does, yes.
But I think also the expectation for you as a PR has changed massively. I would imagine from your client's point of view.
Yeah, there's a lot more to do.
Yeah.
an awful lot more to do, an awful lot more to keep an eye on. And I'm actually quite lucky because most of the companies that I work for are reasonably big organisations. So I don't do very much of the social media side of it for most of them because they generally handle that in-house. And I think to do social media effectively, it's better to do it in-house because you need to be able to react very quickly. And as a PR agent, I have to check everything with my clients to make sure that everything that I am sending out has their approval. I will never send anything out without their approval, without their client's approval. So to do that on social media is actually quite hard because I would have to go back to the client and then you've got a delay. So yeah, I think I'm quite lucky that I don't generally have to deal with that on a full-time basis.
I'd also argue that social media is a full-time job in and of itself.
It is, yeah. I mean, you just think about when you go onto Facebook for your own purposes, it's so easy just to get sucked into it and all of a sudden you find that you spent 2 hours looking at stuff and you haven't realised that time has gone, so... With
social media and kind of, putting stuff out there, you've got the real-time kind of analytics. It's the same for kind of online on a website as well. Kind of press releases going out. I imagine you can kind of check live, kind of how well it's doing, how many eyeballs have reached it from where in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course there are also, because we send press releases out in a different way these days, rather than sending them in the post and you have no idea whether somebody's opened the envelope, with the systems that most of us use to send out our press releases, unless we're just sending them by email, which I don't do, you can track who's opened it, you can track who's clicked through from your press release, you can track who's used that press release, so you know whether what you're putting out is of interest to the magazines. If you send something out, 10 people have opened it but nobody has published it, then you're doing something wrong.
So that's why every time I receive a press release from you, I have to click on a link to download the Word document.
Yes.
I did wonder, why is this not just attached to the email?
Yes.
But still, it's less annoying than a read receipt. How would you say kind of the internet and obviously social media in the last decade or so has kind of impacted PR and marketing?
Massively. When I started doing PR, computers were still in their infancy and we used to send out press releases on bits of paper with printed out photographs, and a lot of time was spent stuffing envelopes. Yeah, we did. When faxes came in, we did fax as well. So yeah, it was printing everything out, going and getting your pictures printed. I mean, that's changed as well because we all have digital cameras now, or we have phones and you can just snap away and they're there instantly. But what PRs have to watch out for with new technology coming in, and one of them is AI, because there's this whole thing about AI can write your stories for you. But I don't know how AI can write creatively. I don't understand how it can do that and how it can understand an industry. So even if you've got all these new technologies, surely there's still a value in the knowledge that you've gained for your clients. I don't understand.
Yeah, but it has to have the content. You can't write it without... So somebody's obviously got to have gone and got the...
Yes, I know. So how does it put it into a...
Maybe it just scours LinkedIn profiles.
Well, no.
How many press releases would you say you would have been able to pull off in a month back then, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, compared to now, with everything being so immediate?
Gosh. Oh, do you know, James, I'm a bit old and my memory's a bit faulty, so it's hard to remember back that far. But certainly not as many, nowhere near the volume that we do now. The turnaround on stuff is a lot faster, and because we've all got computers, we're able to write things more quickly, and we've got the ability to send them by email to our clients to get them approved, rather than having to physically send them a press release and get them to, mark it up with red pen. Everything is a lot quicker, so you can consequently put out a lot more.
I also wanted to ask you, as someone who works in PR, there's a kind of phrase that's used a lot in TV shows and in movies, there's no such thing as bad PR. Would you agree with that?
No, because your PR should be very considered. So you should never send anything out that's detrimental to a company. So in that sense, no, there is no such thing as bad PR, but there is such a thing as bad publicity. And that's where having a PR company can really come into play, because not only can you make sure that everything that is going out from the company is what the company wants to go out. But if there is something that happens to go out from another source that you think is detrimental to the company, as a PR, you would jump on that and try and sort it out. So there's a crisis management side to it as well. Thankfully, I don't have to do that very often because the companies that I work for are fantastic. So
you don't find yourself fighting fires very often?
No, not very often, but every so often there's a show where a bit of equipment fails. Equipment is not infallible. There is going to be something that goes wrong. Generally speaking, it gets fixed very quickly. But because of things like social media, it is really easy for anyone to say, the sound on this was awful. I went to a gig and the sound was terrible. And it might just be one person who had a bad experience, but that's still going out there and it's still getting read. And it still has an effect on that company's reputation unless you do something to counteract that.
You just mentioned, being at a show or whatever. I mean, is quite a lot of your time spent being out and about, or are you mainly office?
Less time is now spent being out and about, and I think that is a consequence of all the communication tools that we've got. Yeah. So, and because people have got phones that have really good cameras on them, there's less of a need for us to go to a gig with our photographic, big expensive photographic equipment and get professional pictures because it's really easy for the guys that are there, the engineers or whoever it might be, to take pictures themselves, and 9 times out of 10 they're decent enough to be able to use for PR purposes. So it generally tends to be the big spectacular stuff that I will go to. And also because of what we were talking about before, with the volume of stuff that goes out, it's impossible to go to every single gig.
So it's where the expectations come to cover more and more.
Yeah,
you can't physically be more place one. But the very same technology that allows you to do more and more also allows you to kind of cover it from afar.
It does, yeah. But obviously there's real benefit in going out there and seeing people. You need to keep in touch with what's going on, and you need to understand how the equipment is being used, and you can't do that unless you actually go and experience it.
But also I would imagine going out and about to things like exhibitions, that's where you get to meet the editors face to face as well, so ensure that relationship is still...
So trade shows are really useful from that point of view for us. Everybody in one place.
You listed some of the companies you mentioned earlier. Obviously you've got, so L Acoustics is your loudspeaker brand.
It is, yes.
Digico manufacture consoles.
Yeah.
Sennheiser microphones, headphones.
Yeah.
Brompton LED processors. I've heard a lot of people mention conflict of interest, not having more than one, say, manufacturer of loudspeakers on their books. Why is that important?
Because if you want to work properly with a company, you need to know what their plans are. And those are things that they don't necessarily want made public immediately. And if you're working for a competitor, then how can they trust you to keep what needs to be kept confidential? There's always going to be that feeling of, well, if we tell her about this new loudspeaker that we're manufacturing that does something completely different, what's to stop that slipping out if she's working for another similar manufacturer? So I know that some PRs do that, and I'm sure that they keep that confidentiality, but it's not something that I would ever want to do, because I want my clients to have absolute confidence that whatever they tell me is private until we all deem that it should be public.
So it's all about sort of building trust.
Yeah.
And sort of client relationships. I mean, how do you go about building a client relationship and building that level of trust and maintaining it?
When people employ you, they generally have an idea of what your reputation is. Most of my clients come through recommendation, so it's not me going out and pitching to them, it's them coming to me because I've been working in this industry for such a long time. They either know me or they know of me through somebody else. And then the rest of it is just time. You spend time with them, talking to them, finding out what their plans are, what their goals are for their company, if they've got short, long-term and medium goals. So it's a time thing that sort of develops the relationship.
I believe you have another one that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yes. As my bit of giving back to the industry, I do the PR for a charity, a UK charity, called Backup, and they provide financial support, and also if people need counselling or legal advice, they provide all that for them, because this industry is inhabited by freelancers, and as freelancers you generally don't have insurance. So if you can't work for whatever reason, whether you're ill, whether you've got mental health issues, whatever it might be, then there is no backup for you. So Backup provides that, and that's, I said, my little bit of giving back that I do as a freebie.
I just want to know if you've ever had to sack a client.
Have I had to sack a
Because I'm
client?
intrigued to know if that happens.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
You don't
does
need to name
happen.
them, of course.
It does happen. Well, it's not, sacking sounds a little bit strong, but there are clients that it doesn't work out with. And most of the time it's because they don't have the time to dedicate to the PR process, because you can't, as an external agent, you cannot do PR on your own. You need to know what's going on within the company, and they need to tell you what's going on. So if you don't get that information and that feedback, then you can't do an effective job. So yes, there are companies that I've stopped working with.
But that goes back to what you were saying about when you're building that trust, the conversations that you have, that gives you an idea of how much those companies are willing to invest just their money, their time and the effort.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really important point. If there are any companies out there that are thinking about employing a PR agent, you have to be prepared to put the time in, because without you putting the time in, it's never going to work, and then you're just going to be disappointed.
That was a very good question to wrap things up on.
Thank you, Seth.
She's getting the hang of it. She was so nervous about coming in. Brilliant. I'll say, well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you
today.
for having me.
No, thank you. It's been lovely. And joking aside, I do know, Richard and I both go back with Sarah a long time. But she does a great job for her clients, and from the amount of PR
Yes.
and the people that you work with, when something hits that inbox, how much work you're going to have to do to it or not. And it makes such a difference to our daily jobs when we get good quality PR through, and I think it helps all of us.